Joe, we are officially live now on the Books4Guys podcast. And man, what this is good timing, I feel like, for us to talk because you being a specialist at blocking kicks and then watching the game Monday night where a blocked punt had a huge effect on the game. I was laughing. I was like, this couldn't have been better timing.
Yeah, it was a good game. I was very impressed with Miami's ability to hold up as much as I thought they would give up more points than that. But it's an old saying: when you get a punt blocked, you usually lose the game because
Yeah.
it's an absolute. You're going to score one way or the other if it's because the guy's punting out of his to get out of his field, his yardage, and it's in automatic scoring, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown. But it was a good game. It was good for the rest of the nation. If you're not a fan of Miami or Indiana's, it was a good football game for once.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I was a little bit nervous that Indiana may run away with it just like they've been doing in Miami. Man, they had grit the entire playoff. Every time I
Yeah,
doubted them, they came to play and surprised me. So yeah, great championship game. And I was actually laughing. I have a buddy we were texting actually every day this week about that blocked punt. And he was so intrigued. He's like, why, like he's like, "I don't understand how punters get blocked, like, go faster, like, be more athletic," and I was like, "Man, there's a lot to it, but you're right," and I was telling him, I was like, "Man, you're gonna laugh." I'm talking to the guy who holds the school record for blocked kicks, and he was just laughing. He was like, "I gotta definitely listen to this when it comes out."
well, he was lucky because that was for him to just put one arm up and
One
block it
arm, yeah,
and I mean just that's you're he's not seeing that. You're lucky as heck.
yeah,
And the guy made a great play. He
yeah,
made a
and then
super play.
watching the ball hit his forearm and his, wrist. Watching his forearm, the ball hit his forearm and his wrist just popped down, just shows the force
No
that hits
question.
you with.
Yeah.
But no, so Joe, good to meet and talk with you. I could talk football with you all day, and that's why I'm so excited. And I've got your book here, White Fang and the Golden Bear. And let me see if I can get it to where it's clear there. Um,
There it
but
is.
I was it was so awesome to read for many reasons. I'm just a sports fan in general,
Yep.
but reading about some of your stories with Bobby Bowden, Lou Holtz. I actually grew up a Bobby Bowden fan. I'm from Arkansas, but for some
Yep.
reason, I just loved Bobby Bowden. I had a Florida State hat, loved hearing his interviews, and so being able to talk with someone who played for him and just after learning all I have, just reading just got me. It was just exciting. It was cool to read your story just as a player, your experience, and then obviously just your story with golf and your dad and just the opportunity that you were able to have. But man, just talk about that. Just talk about your story a little bit in your book and just for our audience who isn't familiar with you.
Yep. Well, it's a book that's a father-son journey through life, and it culminates at Augusta. And that's kind of the overarching at 100,000 feet, but it centers in and around a golf club, a putter that Jack Nicklaus had. And a lot is in and around the putter, to lay the foundation. It's my life and my father's life and how, heroes are looked for in life. And sometimes they're right up underneath your nose and you don't even realize it. And that's one of the things that I hope people get out of the book as they read the story is to understand that we were on this earth once, and in the many client events that I do and book signings, I tell them at the end of it is make sure that you tell your story. Make sure that your kids and your grandkids know who you are, know how you feel, know what you're all about. And if there are some stories in your upbringing, share them. It doesn't have to be in a binding published book. It could be on a loose leaf piece of paper. It could be in a card. It could be anywhere. But before you leave this earth, leave who you are and what you are, and give your story. And it's been a fun journey so far. But it starts out basically in Carroll City, Florida. It's the suburb of Miami. My parents were raised on Miami Beach back in the late 20s and I was born in 62, so they had a lot of time in between. But I grew up in a very typical outside neighborhood of Miami called Carroll City. It was a new area in 1958 when my parents moved out there. We grow up in playing baseball, playing field hockey. We did everything. Anything that we could hit, throw, or break, we usually did it. And my mom was the teacher. My dad was a salesman for McCormick Spices. And but prior to that, my dad was the oldest of 10 children in a three-bedroom house with one bathroom with no air condition back in the 30s. And as the story goes, my dad wasn't a great attender. He was not attending his school like he should have been. And the nuns at St. Patrick were chasing him down to get him back in class, but he wanted to go diving and he wanted to go fool around. And so finally, at 15 years old, I think must have been eighth grade, turning 16. My grandmother looked at him and said, "You either going to stay in school or you're going in the war," because the war had started, World War II.
Mhm.
And he said, "Okay, I'm going in the war." So at 16 years old, not only did he lie about his age, but his mother lied for him about his age. But back then, if you were 17, the parents could sign you off and give you the opportunity to go into it. And so my dad, we had a video or a podcast when we didn't have a podcast. It was just a recording of my dad for the honor flight. And he gave us, all of the information of where he went and what he was doing and his LCI boat that he was on. And he was a mechanic. So there was different mechanics on the boat. And so it starts and it gives you an understanding of what was going on in World War II.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I come along and I played football and I was a quarterback in high school, and some tragedies happened throughout my high school and throughout my life from that standpoint. But I won't spoil the book. But the things in life that don't go our way are there for us to grow, not only in our faith, but in our faith in other people. And that's part of my life. Everything hasn't been rosy. It's not been an easy life from that standpoint, but we go through. Coach Bowden used to always say, you never give up. You never know when the next page is going to turn, and your luck or your promise in life is going to come in full circle. So I go have a high school. I quarterback threw for 1,500 yards my senior year when 1,500 yards was a lot of yards. We were
Yeah.
running a lot of wishbones and veer back then. You didn't throw the ball much, but offense coordinator for the Miami Dolphins, Howard Schnellenberger, his son was my tight end in high school. So it opened up a path and a opportunity for him to put in a passing offense. And so we did pretty well that year. And offensively, we didn't win a whole bunch of games, but so be it. And then I got the opportunity to work at the Miami Dolphin training facility. And so that gave me an entree into working out with Miami Dolphins, Mark Duper, and throwing the ball with Dan Marino. Marino and I played against each other. He was a little bit older than I was, but at Florida State, we played against Pitt back then. And so it really kind of laid a great high school ground. How should I say a foundation for me to understand what I was about to go into when I was going to play football at Florida State. And then also to be around coaches and be around Coach Schnellenberger and Tom Keene and Coach Chula, needless to say. And it was just a great atmosphere those 3 years of my sophomore, junior, and senior year in high school. And so, here I am. I threw for 1,500 yards. I was 16, turning 17 in my senior year. and I had no scholarship. Nobody wanted me to come to their school. So I went to a prep school up in Virginia and called Fort Union Military Academy. And it was a great, played 6 different sports up there because it was the only way to get off the campus. The more sports you played, the more away games that you had. So I ran track, I did baseball, football, I was a diver, anything to get off the campus, I was
Yeah.
doing it. And then had a great year there. And and then Florida State gave me the opportunity to walk on. And we, as you mentioned before, I was a starter my junior year, got fired in the first game. I didn't play much the rest of the year, and I was the 15 free safety after spring practice. And then, of course, I had some successes my senior year, and it worked out in a positive manner. And again, not telling too much about the story, but along with that, my junior and senior year, Steve Nicholas, Jack's second son, was my roommate for 2 years. And there was one day that I was going out to play golf one day and I broke my putter and he kind of flipped me this putter. And so it was a putter that later came about, and that's what the book is about, White Fang. It was a putter that he had, and it had some great history behind it, should I say. And he got the opportunity to get it back. And there was a little present and a gift that he gave me and I gave him. And that's kind of the basis of the whole story.
Yeah. No, that's perfect, Joe, and it hits all the points as just a guy, sports, relationship with your father, an incredible opportunity that you get to do with your dad because of the blessing of being able to meet someone and become friends with someone and build a relationship. And again, just being outgoing, being open, meeting people, doing things, leading to opportunities that led to this incredible story that you're able to share. I couldn't put the book down. Once I started it, I think I read it in 1.5 days. I was on the treadmill and I was like, man, this is just so cool. This is such a cool story. And it's awesome that you got to experience it and now get to share it where guys like me get to read it and just kind of, again, learn about that story of you and your dad and your parents and what you went through as an athlete. There's a lot of, I walked on in college as well, so that resonated with me. And now I'm a big golf fan, so just learning about, I've always known about Jack Nicklaus, but I didn't really know about this putter, and now knowing the story behind that, it was just just an awesome story, Joe.
And I think where it resonates with, and it wasn't planned, that's just the way Jack was. He was a very family oriented individual. He had grabbed me the first time I ever met him in our apartment. He grabbed me by the arm and he pulled me back through 15, 16 different people into the back bedroom, didn't say a word. And as soon as we got back there, he says, how you two working out?
Yeah.
And I said, we're doing fine. We're doing good." But he was so conscious of his family. He had a pact with
Yeah.
his wife that he was only going to be away on the golf tour no more than 2 weeks without coming back to the house or coming back to the family. And he lived that
Yeah.
promise. And so, when you see a person like that, it can dedicate himself not only to his profession, not only to his trade, but to his family too. And, even as a grandfather, there are many stories of him, playing. He gets done with his round, now, again, he was one of the first to get, private planes. Him and Arnold Palmer were, and that's a luxury, obviously, that he was able to do that. And he would fly down, see his grandkids play, and then fly right back so he could be up for a round of golf on the next day. But you know what? That's the tribute. That's the tribute that a father can learn for their family,
Yeah.
because there's nothing worse than a dad that's not there or a mom that's not there. And I think that that is portrayed in the book. And I think it's one of those things. My father was the same way. He wasn't as obsessed with it probably, but my mother was. My mother would come home, and if I had a 6:30 baseball game, she'd be in her car, and she'd just pull up in behind the fence, and she would watch, and she
Yeah.
would be there. And you knew she was always there. She may not be sitting in the stands, but she was in the car. She could see through the car. So she wanted to know and let us know that she was watching.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that part, those lessons of the book too, because my parents were the same way. They were always there, and how as a kid, you don't realize how important that is, and maybe you do a little bit, but especially later in life, you really look back and appreciate the efforts that they made to be there, to get you what you need, get you to practice, be at every game, be supportive of you and your
Exactly.
friends, take them under your wings. Yeah, I definitely, as I was reading, I picked up on that as well, and it made me think of my own parents too, and just the sacrifices they made to allow me to play football and to drive me to these 7 on
Right.
7 tournaments all over the country and all of that, and Jack seemed to be that way. You talking about your dad, I was like, "Man, this is" again, it resonated with me, and I
Right.
know there's probably a lot of people that talk to you about that, and that's probably a real joy of having the book out there, is having those kinda conversations with people.
It is, and people say that they're busy and that, but you got to make time. You make time. You create, you know, a plan to do it. Like no different in any business that's out there. But I think one of the things that my dad and I used to talk about, because again, in my coaching career, being around, and he had a lot of leadership bosses in his McCormick company, and he would always make the comment about single thought process people. In other words, single minded, single focused. And, you have to be that way, but you can't forego your, that can't be who you are. you ha- as an individual, you have to have other things, whether it's your family, your faith, uh, your passion. Less than what 5% of the people in the world get the opportunity to work at their passion. The street sweeper didn't grow up to be the street sweeper. I didn't grow up to be, a national sales manager in a lending company in a bank, but that's what I do to work. But it doesn't justify who I am as a person. And so I think you have to have that single mindedness and be focused, but you have to give yourself some time and effort in other things to be well rounded. And we had a lot of conversations in and around that.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's incredible. I've gotta ask you, Joe, just because 'cause I've got you on here, and I mentioned I was such a big Bobby Bowden fan. What was one of your what's a funny story, I guess, you have about playing for Coach Bowden? What was one of your best memories, and something that's a funny story you share from time to time?
I've got several, but I'll give you a quick one of my last game. Now here I have gotten fired in my junior year in the first game. I played a little the second game of my junior year, and I didn't play the whole rest of the year. And I'm the 15 free safety going in, like I said, to um, into spring practice, and then I'm like the backup free safety when we get to 2 days, because one guy flunked out, another guy got hurt, and something happened to the third guy. I forgot who it was. So we have this great season. We block a whole bunch of kicks, and they didn't have special teams players of the year or All American, but there was a bunch of publications that had a lot of different things about, and it wasn't just me. We had two other guys that were blocking punts too. So it was team effort. But the last game of the year, I jump off sides and I roughed the kicker one time. So as I'm running off the field, Coach Bowden grabs me by my face mask, and he never does that, never does that. And he grabbed that my helmet. He says, "What the heck are you trying to give this effing game away?" And he never says the F bomb. I've heard it in 5 years, he said it two times. And so, of course, I said no, and I turned around and he walked away from me. Well, needless to say, at the end of the game, we block another kick and I run it in for a touchdown. And then I had an interception to close Georgia's drive at the end of the game. So it all came out okay. But, and one of the offsides was I jumped. I didn't jump. It's just everybody else was slow. We looked at the film. I wasn't offsides, but it looked like I was to the referee because the center picked his hands up and then I jumped and then everybody else waited for the ball to go. So fast forward about 15, 20 years later, I'm up for a practice before a game and Jimbo Fisher was the offensive coordinator and Coach Bowden and I are standing there on the sideline and and the quarterbacks are throwing. And so and I turned to Coach Bowden and I told him this isn't in the book. And I said, Coach, I said, you didn't say the F bomb a whole bunch. And he just started laughing. And Jimbo, it was out of his every fifth word sometimes. And
Yeah.
but I saw him, Jimbo, he's starting to creep towards me because I was telling the same story that I just told you. And I said, I don't know if you remember that, Coach Bowden, but you grabbed me by the face and you telling me, are you trying to give this effing game away? And so Jimbo just starts laughing and Coach Bowden was laughing. So I hung that over him, long term from that standpoint. But
Yeah.
Coach Bowden was great to play for. He really was. He was a player's coach. He was an executive. He let the coaches coach. He kind of left the defense alone. He was always involved with the offense, and obviously he had a great run. Had a great run at it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've read his book, and it's actually on the Books for Guys website as well. It's one of the first books I ever put on there, just because I guess of the timing when Books for Guys was created. And I was reading his book about 3 years ago. I didn't realize he had one, and it was again such a joy to read about him and his story as well. But hearing
Right.
people talk about him, and then again, as such a young football fan, hearing some of his sideline interviews, they were hilarious. So I just quickly became a fan. But and Joe, you went on to you've been in the finance and banking space for a long time now too, but you coached for many, many years after you finished your playing days at Florida State as well.
I did. I had 13 really good years. It was 6 at LSU, and I got the opportunity to go to Notre Dame for 3 years,
Yeah.
and then Cincinnati Bengals for 3 years, and then the Philadelphia Eagles. And one Monday night against San Francisco, kind of sent me in a different path. Let's put it that way. But it was a good run. I had some really good experiences. We won 2 SEC championships at LSU. We should have had a national championship against my alma mater. We beat Florida State in the game of the century. And of course, we lost to Boston College the week later. But we both won our bowl game and we had beaten them. But again, that was back when it was UPI and AP, and everybody wanted Coach Bowden to win his first national championship. And I thought after we beat A&M for the second time in the Cotton Bowl that we would share it. And there was a precedent that I think Miami and Washington and even Georgia Tech and somebody shared a national championship, but they all gave it to Coach Bowden. And so, there was a little bias there towards Notre Dame back then. So we won't go down that path. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it was too bad that my own alma mater, I was happy that they won the national championship, but they took it away from me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's cool reading too about your relationship with Lou Holtz. I've read one of his books too. Also have that. And as an Arkansas fan, him leaving Arkansas and going to Notre Dame, there's a lot of story and history that I've learned about during that era of college football too. And then
No
reading,
question.
your experience and being a coach there and everything too was really cool. I'm sure he's also a very interesting individual, and I've loved following him as well. Him and Bobby Bowden were 2 coaches that I looked up to and really enjoyed learning a lot about.
I was very, very fortunate I never obviously coached under Coach Bowden. I really wanted to. A couple times I tried to get back there, but their coaches never left. It was old school. They didn't have 20 different coaches now like they have nowadays. But but they're both similar in many ways. but completely different from a personality standpoint. But they were both very CEO like driven people around the table. You have this, they had different responsibilities, and you were expected to live up to those responsibilities. And so it was very, very fruitful for me because it gave me a good balance and understanding. And both of them had single mindedness to them, but they did do other things. You know, Coach Holtz was a avid golfer, and Coach Bowden was a golfer too. And the two of them, heck, they were family friends. They would go on the Nike trips. You know, a lot of um, the trips in the off seasons, they their spouses and their wives they would go together. And then I get to Bill Arnsparger. You know, I knew of him going through the Miami Dolphins and working down there as I said before. He gave me a really an understanding of how details really matter. He was awesome because he was very even keeled. One day you'd walk down the hall and he'd say, "Hey Joe, how you doing?" The next day you walk down the hall and he wouldn't even, because he was thinking of something else. And I love that about him. And you know, he was one of those guys. GA at LSU, and then when he left to be the athletic director, I was the GA for Mike Archer, and Mike Archer gave me my first full-time job at LSU. So, and then again, back to getting into the NFL, it was David Shula. David and I used to throw and catch together and, you know, cover each other. And as we were playing, he was playing at Dartmouth and I played at Florida State, but it was, you know, he gave me the opportunity to get into the NFL, and that was a great, you know, 3 years. My son was born. My oldest son was born in Cincinnati, but we went 8-8 in 1 year, and David got fired after the fourth game and had to pack up and move on. Went to the Eagles, and that was just a it's not the Eagles of what you see on TV right now, I can promise you.
Yeah, yeah,
It was a different era, different time, and different people, let's put it
yeah,
that way.
yeah. Yeah, I can imagine, but it's still it's so cool. It just interesting to learn about that, you know, through your eyes and your experience and who you got to be around and just your trajectory of, you know, player, coach, and then moving on, you know, post football. And Joe, you know, obviously this is your story is incredible. I'm so glad you wrote it because you know, again, guys like me, it's a very enjoyable story to read about and take things from. What motivated you to, you know, in simple terms, actually write it? You know, where did the motivation come to put it together and put this book out there?
I never thought about it really. My neighbor across the street, God rest his soul, Ralph Barber, is who I can dedicate that to because he's always been pushing on me and pushing on me. And he passed away of a glioblastoma before we were, but he was always prodding me about it. You know, hey, it's a great story. I know it's your story and you don't think that way, but you know, and so one day, like many days after playing golf, somebody would, you know, hey, you know, hey, come here, listen to this story. And they would tell me, hey, tell that White Fang story. And so I told it one day at Palmacia Country Club, and it just so happened that there was the writer for the Tampa Bay Rays for MLB baseball, and he was walking by, and a buddy of mine, Doug Shields, says, "Hey, tell him about this story." And so, excuse me, and so I told him the story, and his name is Bill Chastain, and so he called me the next day and he said, "You got me." And I said, "What do you mean I got you?" He said, "Well, I've read about, I know about Jack and I've read about Steve and I've read a little bit about you, but there's nowhere that I can find that there's anything written about your dad playing Augusta with Jack Nicklaus, the guy that won it 6 times." And so he kind of pushed me over the bridge to jump in. And he was I don't think I could have done it. I could have done it on my own. I would have really kind of fledged through it, but he really was able to position things, ask me, well, how did I feel when this happened? What did your parents say? He was really kind of turning the orange to get the juice out of it. And it was in there. It just had to be prodded to get out. And he was a very, very, very good with it. And I thank the world that he said that I got you. And we appreciate it. It was a great partnership between the two of us.
Yeah. That's awesome, Joe. And again, I'm so glad you got pushed to writing this book and putting this story out there because it really is a great story with a lot of lessons to it. And again, just I've been so interested in talking to you just selfishly because of my personal interest in sports and all of this. And I know a lot of people personally that will enjoy watching and listening to this and then hopefully picking up your book and reading it themselves too. Hopefully this will spark some interest because it's certainly been one of my favorite books of recent to read. And again, just Joe, thank you for the support of Books for Guys. Thank you for coming on today and talking more about your story. And I look forward to it's on the website for anybody who's interested in learning more about it. And there's a link to go purchase it. But I look forward to hearing what people think and after they listen and watch this. Because I think there'll be a lot of people that follow Books for Guys in the podcast, just again being interested in this stuff that'll find some great entertainment as well as some lessons from it.
I agree wholly. It's been a good ride and people enjoy it. And I warn everybody, if you may want to bring a tissue or two as you're reading it. I've gotten a lot of feedback there. And if you're a macho man and you don't want to let people know that you can cry over some distress, then go read it in a closet somewhere. But that's part of life, and that's we have ups and downs in life, and it's been a fun thing for me, but it's been a an opportunity to share lessons of leadership and lessons of life, and I'm glad that we had this time together. So I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it, Joe.
Take care. Thanks.